So some things you should know about me. I'm an Alaskan immigrant living in Texas. I moved there about 17 years ago, which was a cool experience because when I moved there, I had never lived in the South before, and I didn't know that everyone in Texas was Christians. And so I moved there and found out like everyone was a Christian. Until I found out you can be a Christian Texan, not believe in Jesus or read the Bible. So I realized like this is a whole different kind of variety. So I'll unpack what I had to learn through all that. But the most important thing is 34 years ago, I became a follower of Jesus, and he radically transformed everything about my life and my destiny. 21 years ago, I married an Iowa farm girl, Jackie, and if you meet her, you'll get to find out my sales skills are actually pretty good. That's my primary exhibit, is I got her to marry me. And then I'm a girl dad, so I got 2 little girls, which means I know a lot of Jane Austen, a lot of Disney musicals. I've worn a tutu, a tiara, and I'm in the hunt for good boys. So if you guys have exceptional young men, I'm open to contract marriages and arranged marriages very, very much. But relevant to Sean, and I'm so proud of Sean and the work that he has championed. I'm so proud of what this whole event represents. 20 years ago, I was wrestling. I was in Chicago working for a big company, a startup that was rapidly growing, and I was wrestling at my desk because I liked business, and I was good at it. But I loved Jesus, and I wanted to be faithful to him, and I felt like those were competing interests. In fact, when I didn't go to seminary and I went into business, I had a little lady at my home church back in Alaska who was like, "Oh, Mike, I thought you loved Jesus. Why are you doing business? What happened? Did you lose your soul?" I mean, she was like just despondent that I went into business. And so I was wrestling with God, maybe I do need to get out of this job. I was serving at my church. I was doing mentoring young youth. I was doing refugee ministry. I was giving generously, and I appreciated that. There's only so much you can do in the margins of your time. And so I was asking God, do I need to change my context? Would you get me out of here? And I realized I had a big, big issue. See, I was letting the logo on my shirt define how I viewed myself. And so when I was wearing my work logo, I was a work person. I had a testimony for Jesus. Like, people knew I was a Christian. I told them about my church. I was known. I wasn't like a secret agent Christian. But I viewed that as just like, be a billboard for Jesus, make money, and then go do real ministry in the rest of my time. And I was letting my vocation define my identity. And I was asking God, get me out of here, change my location. And he went, your location's not the issue. Your understanding your job is. And I began to realize I needed to flip those 2 issues. And when I did, I had no idea what that looked like. When I went, well, if I'm going to be everything you say in the Bible I'm called to be, I don't know how to do that in a publicly traded company. Where's the attorney? Like, I was like, I'm not sure what's legal, what's right, and I don't want to look like a bozo, and I don't know what to do here. And that launched me on a journey. And I wasn't 94X then. I didn't know a single book, person, author thing. I just went, I'm frustrated. I stand before you today to say that I believe this room can change the world. There's a phrase we use in our context called business as a ministry. I believe that business as a ministry can change the world. In fact, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was in Washington, D.C. at a Supreme Court case. I was meeting with a bunch of legal brainiacs who were working all sorts of cool stuff. I was doing some lobbying on Capitol Hill on issues. And we're at this gathering, and it's one of those like secret king-making meetings where they're talking about judge appointments and legislation and a 15-year strategy of court cases and what's going to happen. And Michael Ferris, a friend of mine who at the time was leading Alliance Defending Freedom, was walking through all this cool stuff he was doing, and he stopped and he said, but you know what, as important as laws are, and laws are very important, and Congress is important, and judges are important, and voting, today's voting day, I hope you guys all vote, like voting is important. He looked in the back, he said, what Mike represents is actually the most dangerous thing in America. The most dangerous thing in America would be Christians in business actually living out their faith there. Because the reality is, I get to serve about 4,000 members today. They employ just shy of 1 million people. Those people have spouses and children. They have customers and vendors. We impact about 10 million people a month right now through these businesses. And he looked at me and he said, the reality is this room can shape culture tomorrow way more rapidly and realistically than any single congressman, senator, or judge appointment that'll happen this winter. This room represents more power to change culture and change this country than any election we're going to do. And I'm all about civic engagement in elections. So I believe business and ministry can change the world. The question is how. Like, how do you go from cool, fuzzy feelings about Jesus to actually doing something with it? So I got invited to C12 by a buddy who owned a construction company. And he got me to C12 by drawing these 3 little circles up you see on the screen. He said, Mike, do you ever feel the tension of wanting to honor God in your business, but not knowing if you are? One of my favorite questions once I moved to Texas, where everyone's Christian, they just don't know Jesus, was asking them, hey, what makes you different because you're a Christian in business? How is your bank different because you're a follower of Jesus? How is your construction company different? And I get pretty lame answers. The top answers I get in Texas, now this is Texas, this is in Samaria, south of the river here. The questions I get answered are things like, I don't lie, I don't steal, I don't cheat, I pay people fairly. I'm like, well, congratulations. Like, you don't go to jail. That's good. That's a good minimum essential. What else? I'm like, I keep Christ in Christmas, and I say, God bless you when people sneeze. I'm like, slow clap, that's amazing. But I think there should be more than just a moral ethic of do no harm and wave some Jesus flags around. And they'd be like, yeah, but I run a home health care company. What do you expect me to do? I run a roofing company. What do you expect me to do? Like, more than just not do bad things. But the reality is I didn't know what is a model? How do you know you're worshiping God through the work you do? But then second, if we're all called to be disciples of Jesus, Jesus didn't call any part-time people. Everyone, if you are a follower of Jesus, you're called to be a full-time disciple of him. You're called to be an ambassador for Christ, a minister of reconciliation, all the things Jesus talked to that band of 12 and everyone else, like, that applies to us. The only question is whether we're doing a good job of it. But in business, we somehow reduce that down to giving a little money away. I moved to Texas, and I tended to find Christians who are either obnoxious about their faith in business, where they're waving all sorts of flags around, but running crappy businesses. And I'm like, could you wave the flag a little less violently because you make us look bad? Or I'd find people who were running moral businesses, and they would pride themselves, I call it the good old boy club, because they maybe tithed on their business. I'm like, well, wow, like, congratulations. There's got to be more than just giving a little money and being obnoxious. And I believe that the greatest asset you and I have, I'm all for generosity. I'm all for wild generosity. I think the question is not how much should you give, but how much should you keep, because it's all his. But I also think fundamentally, I actually think God is loaded. I don't think God is a 501c3 desperately hoping for your liquidity event to fund his ministry. I actually think God owns everything, including the money the pagans have. I think we get to give. I don't think your greatest asset is to give God the few bucks he needs to go do his plan. I think it's pretty safe. I think the greatest asset you and I have is influence on people. And the greatest thing we'll be held accountable for is, what did you do with the influence you were given? How did you shape the world? Not, here's my tax-deductible receipts. And then the third part is, you can be all about trying to change the world, build great businesses, make Jesus known. But if you're a Christian jerk in the process, if you lose your soul, if you lose your marriage, if you lose your children, if you don't smell and look like Jesus because you're trying to win everybody for Jesus, you can do it wrong. And there could be a tension when you're trying to build a business, work 20 hours a day in a crazy crisis, trying to win everyone for Christ, trying to be, in my case, a dad to 2 little girls and a husband to Jackie, and trying to be a son of God, to lose yourself in that process. St. Augustine said one of the biggest issues for Christians is misordered loves. And so he said, Mike, do you feel the tension of trying to have a life in order, to do business as ministry, and actually honor God in your business? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, well, we sometimes deal with those things separately. It's helpful if we could deal with them together and realize that God cares about what we do, how we do it, why we do it, the way we do it, and who we become in the process. So a couple of models. I'm going to share some big kind of master tool paradigms, and we're going to go a little deeper in one of them today. But we needed some theory. Here's some theories of change. So part of our theory of change is that on the work as worship side, we like to take the old Steve Kaplan balanced scorecard, add a 5th dimension of ministry, and say, well, you could take those dimensions every business has. Every business has sales and marketing and customers, hopefully. Every business has a product you do, a service you do. You've got people, you've got finances, and we'd add, if you're a follower of Jesus, you've got ministry. And the question is, how are you doing excellence and goodness in all those dimensions? And how are you uniquely honoring God and putting his truth into practice in all those domains of a business? And so that's what we call a 5-point alignment matrix, which I'm going to unpack in a biblical worldview in a few minutes. But then you also got to go, well, what is success? So we think one of the issues is we lack healthy measures of success. If you're running a business, I don't believe God is glorified by a poorly run company. I hope your bank is very profitable and successful and excellent, and the customers get exceptional customer service, and it's not bad for a Christian bank. It's an excellent bank to the glory of God that happens to be done in the name of Jesus. But we think there's at least 3 different scorecards of measuring success, or 3 different value adds. One would be economic value add. That we're pretty familiar with. Profitability, quality ratings, efficiency, all the KPIs of business success. We believe you should be a good steward of God's capital. A buddy of mine used to ask the question, if God owns everything and you're just a manager, then if you were to go to the Kingdom Holding Company Investment Committee and ask him to double down investment in your business next year, or to renew your contract as CEO, what would be your pitch based upon previous performance? Like, what about last year's performance would make heaven say, that's the guy we want run this business? Look at what he did. We definitely want outcomes here. So economic value add, but we also look at team value add. You're going to hear from my friend at Life Pulse later. We believe that how humans perform, engagement, flourishing, retention, all those things around. Shouldn't a Christian business be the best place to work? Shouldn't the man or woman who radically doesn't know Jesus and disagrees with us still think that's the best place I've ever worked because I'm a follower of Jesus? And the third is spiritual value add. That there should be people coming to know Christ, being discipled in Christ, and love being radically shown in the name of Christ. And we should be able to measure those things. So we think there should be different measurements. And then carry matrix, the reality is, if you look at the bottom horizontal axis there, people have got physical needs, they've got emotional needs, and they got spiritual needs. We've got people who've got struggle to pay rent or take care of kids and buy health care for their sick children. We've got people with depression and addictions and marital problems. And we've got people who are far from Christ. We've got our employees, their families, we've got customers, we've got our community, and we've got the world. And we think as business owners, we get to authenticate the love of Jesus. We think about caring from the inside out. Sometimes Christians will rush towards giving money to fund wells or sponsor kids in other continents, which is great. We should do lots of that. But Jesus said, go to Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, then the ends of the world. And we can sometimes miss the greatest ministry we have is those people we're spending 94X with right in front of us. But then we also need to make sure we're held accountable. So on a regular basis, we think there needs to be a rhythm of reflection and assessment saying, how am I doing in this? Am I loving my wife well? Am I spending time with God? Am I a good steward of my health? Am I involved in my local church? Like, all those things matter to then create this integrated, flourishing life. The question that will anchor today to me, for you, is what is your vision of success? I'm going to give you some ideas and some cool tools, but at the end of the day, if you don't have an eternal perspective, and I'm going to say this right now, no cool slides I throw up or tools you get from me or anybody else today will matter at all if you don't have a big enough vision for success and a dissatisfaction with the present that moves you to change. If you don't want more, you won't do more. And if success is a false dichotomy of, well, I'm in a season of life right now, I'm doing success, then I'm going to do significance, that's a false dichotomy. Good. I've got good news and bad news. Oh, yeah, there's that. Good news, bad news. So what's your vision of success? Good news is God sees your work. God cares about your work. Dozens and dozens of times throughout the Bible, God will send a prophet to say, I see your work. I see what you're doing. In the letters to the churches in Revelation, sometimes that was good news and sometimes that was bad news. He's like, I see you. I see what you're doing. I see what you're not doing. I see why you're doing it. So the good news and bad news is God sees our work and cares about our work. And I believe that too many leaders in Christ are in the right places, but we're playing the wrong game. When I was at that startup in Chicago, I was asking God to get me out of the place I was so I could finally do the things he called me to do. And he had to remind me, your place is not the problem. You need to learn how to do your job there. You need to be who I've made you to be, where you are. You can be on the right board playing the wrong game. And here's what I like to think about. Checkers and chess, everyone's familiar with the game. The checkered board is actually one of the oldest game boards in humanity. It's 4,500 years old. It's the first, actually in modern day Iraq is where the checkered board was first invented. There's actually like 300 different games, all based upon a checkered board. So the most classic we know in America would be checkers or chess. Checkers is usually an easier game to learn as a kid. It's just about getting your pieces to jump over others and get to the other side, and you get to be made a king, and you win. Chess, much more complicated. Parts have different roles. There's a lot of strategy. Things go forwards and backwards. It's not about every piece becoming a king. It's a battle of kings for a kingdom, and it's about which king will win. If you are playing on a checkered board and you think you're playing chess when the actual game is checkers, you can have artificial moments of success, then find out you lost because you were playing the wrong game. Right board, wrong game. If you're in business and you think your only goal is to survive and make a little bit of money, you may be on the right board, but playing the wrong game. And that's what I want to give us some ideas of today. Because how many of you agree that the world is messed up? Anybody concerned about things in our country or your city or your family? I mean, we could spend all day going down the laundry list of issues, from values to families to confusion. We got people don't know what truth is. We don't know what a woman is. We don't know what family is. Like, there's so many things we could complain about. But as Christians, everything you'd build on that list of this is missing, this is broken, this is confused, is our invitation. That's why we're here. Leaders exist to solve problems. You were brought, God, this is the perfect moment in human history where God said, in this mess, let's have you lead your business. In this mess, this moment, let's have these sons and daughters of mine stay here. He didn't put us here to survive. So I believe the problems of the world today, the problems of our country and our city and your industry, are not the obstacle to you getting to be everything God called you to be. It's actually the validation that it's needed. It is harder to be a Christian in America. That's why you need to be a Christian in America. Fewer people know Jesus. Well, then I think the people who do should probably fix that. This is the moment we were created for, and business is the context of that. I want to just reiterate that in all the things going on negative in the world, you and I are not victims of it. We are here to be liberators, freedom fighters. We are here to change that story, and business is one of the most incredible platforms with incredible license and opportunity you'll ever be given. In fact, pastors would be jealous of the opportunity you have to shape culture and reach people. And I'm going to unpack a little bit more what that looks like. There's some verses I'm going to throw up here that you probably have heard 100, 1,000 times. I had, but I just want to reiterate a key word in these. In the famous sermon of Jesus, he said, "You are the salt of the earth." What struck me a few years ago is realizing he didn't say you could become the salt of the earth. You might get called to go to seminary and become the salt of the earth. You might get to go on a mission trip and be the salt of the earth. He just said, if you are a follower of Jesus, this is what you are. You are the salt of the earth. You are called to be a preserving agent and to change the world you're in. You are the light of the world. Not you may be selected. Now, some of us may be dim bulbs. We may be poor quality salt. But the question is not whether or not you've been called to be light or called to be salt. The question is whether or not you're being good salt and effective light. It's in the context of him saying what we are that he then says, and let's go do good stuff. Let's go do stuff. Let's go do business in such a way that people have to go, where are they from? Where's this coming from? And glorify God. So I believe the greatest risk in our world right now is not a woke agenda or a political party or a movement that may ruin things. I don't think the greatest risk to Christianity is the world blowing up God's plans, because I actually don't think God's kingdom is at risk. We're not here to rescue the church or to save God's kingdom. It's pretty secure. The question is whether or not we will be at risk of missing the actual story we're called to be. And I think the real risk is you and I, make sure the slides are going up, that the real risk is you and I playing the wrong game and mistaking surviving life for winning at life. I think the real risk is you and I confusing survival with winning. Getting to the end of our life going, whew, I lived, and now I die. Whew, I didn't lose everything, but did you win anything? I think confusing comfort with actual success as our assignment is the greatest risk for us in business. I don't have time to fully unpack this. My good buddy John Stonestreet, the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, does a great job unpacking a lot of work around understanding the biblical story. But we have to remember, God created the heavens and the earth. God created the garden. God created people. He created us for relationships and for marriage. He created us for work. That all got messed up. We're all familiar with the sin story. We all are very aware of it. We all wrestle with it. Jesus comes, redemption, but now there's a restoration. We are here not just to wait for our plane ticket home, but to actually demonstrate what Jesus has done and restore things. And business is an undeniable, powerful part of it. So I want to speak to another identity label for you all. I want to suggest that everybody here, if you are a leader in business, then you are what the Bible would call a king or a queen. In biblical times, kings and queens led city-states, sometimes regions, sometimes entire nations. They shaped economies, they shaped lives, they shaped society. They had incredible influence over how every man and woman in that domain would experience life. If you lead a business, you get to do that. Now, in the Bible, there's lots of different kings and queens over periods of time. And unfortunately, there's a tragic cycle that they all exhibit. And this cycle goes throughout human history. This cycle is true in nations and countries. We've seen it in businesses and organizations and communities and families. And the tragic cycle is this. You'd have really hard times, and amazing judges or kings or warriors would rise up and would combat evil and do great things. And there'd be decades of prosperity, and everyone would rejoice and be grateful for these heroes that get statues and things named after them, universities named after them. But then a generation is raised up under them who experiences the prosperity that they inherited. And those hard times that create strong people and those good times then create weak people. And there ends up being this tragic doom loop of human history. Yeah, I have a little girl who just did her first season of volleyball. She went to her first practice, loved it. All of her friends are there. They got to play around the ball in the court. It was all cool. Day 2 was conditioning, and she discovered the word burpees. And she came home and said, "Dad, I'm quitting volleyball. Volleyball, it's not fun. It's stressful. I don't think I should do it." And I said, "I think you're going to do it." She's like, "No, Dad, it's stressful." I was like, "Good." And she's like, "No, Dad, I said it's stressful." And I said, "Sweetie, the only way your body grows muscles, the only way your bones get more dense, the only way your mind gets sharper is with some stress. So I'm not looking for you to be miserable or tortured, but you're going to have to go through some pain, and it's going to make you a stronger woman. You're going to be a stronger thinker. You're going to be a stronger player. You may not be a great volleyball player, but you're going to be a better person. And so we're going to go through some hard times." And she just finished her first season, and it's like, "I think I might do it again. I am stronger." But we have a comfort culture that is averse to short-term discomfort and pain. And as leaders, the number one reason why I find Christian business owners don't do something is being afraid of a little pain. Now, the good news is there's usually a lot less pain than you think. Sean's not up here saying, "I lost everything, was put in jail in communist China, lost my family, but it was all worth it for Jesus." We're in the greatest country in the history of the world with the most liberty and prosperity and abundance in the history of the world. And the reality is you can be a radical follower of Jesus, and it's probably not going to cost you much more than some inconvenience and a couple weird looks. I've got people, we've served leaders in Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, South Africa. I was just meeting with leaders in Malaysia where it is illegal to use the word gospel, heaven, cross, because those are owned by Islam. And one of our members, pastors, spoke about those things, spoke out at his church on Sunday, and just had forced disappearance, was arrested and won't be seen again. We don't have that here. We just have apathy, afraid of losing our comfort. Now in the Bible, there's these kings and queens. They're generally summarized in one of 3 broad categories. You got evil, wicked kings. They worshiped idols. They did horrible, crazy stuff. Those are pretty easy to be like, "I'm not one of them." If you're here, I'm assuming you're not a wicked, evil king. You wouldn't have been invited, or you wouldn't like the program. Most of the other kings and queens are just okay kings. Meh. They'd be like, this one was not evil like the bad king before them. They didn't sacrifice children. They didn't build high places. They didn't worship idols. They weren't that bad, but they didn't stop it from happening either. They practiced personal piety. You know, I'm gonna worship God. I'm not gonna do that evil stuff. But they did not use their power and authority to actually shape culture. Those were called okay kings. And it would just get short little epitaphs. Mike was a king. He didn't worship idols, but the kingdom was still wicked anyway. But he was okay. We think he loved God. It just didn't change anything. Only 16% of kings and queens were labeled good. Good kings and queens, it didn't just say didn't worship idols like those Texan Christians. I just don't do bad things. Good kings and queens loved God, tore down high places, raised up goodness, prospered their kingdom, were champions of justice and truth, and the entire kingdom would benefit and flourish because of their reign. Those were the very few good kings and queens. Only 16% deserved that title. So in business, I'm going to go back to that first master tool, the 5-point alignment matrix, and think about it this way. If you were to apply, every single one of your businesses have got a way you make money, how you sell, how you buy, how you market, how you do deals. You've all got how you operate. You've all got the way you hire, fire, compensate people, terminate people, grow people. The question for each of those things then would be, are you a good king or bad king? Are you a good queen or bad queen? Is where are there high places in that area of your business or your industry that your industry just accepts? I was in an industry once where it was common to do bribes, we called them commissions, to brokers and referral agents to sell services to public sector customers. It was just industry norm. It's not corruption, it's just fees in America, right? It's just fees. And so we just said we're actually going to disclose those things, cause a big disruption. Buddy of mine ran a consumer products company. Incredibly generous, gave 30, 40% of his money away, leading people to Christ left and right, had AA meetings and Bible studies at work. But someone called him out, hey, your products are being advertised in national magazines with girls in bikinis and all sorts of vulgarity and sexuality. And he's like, well, that's just our product space. That's just how you sell motorcycles. I'm like, but you're not just somebody, you're Jesus's person. Jesus cares about how you make money, not just what you do with it. Is the way you're doing sales, is there high places in that area of your industry that need to be torn down? Where there goodness to be built up. Hey, I know it's acceptable to do shady things here, to have bad warranty programs here, to treat people poorly in this area, but in our business, we're not going to. We're going to tear down high places. We're going to stand up goodness. We're going to make this particularly righteous. In fact, we're going to also look at what is excellence. How do we go above and beyond, not because the law requires it, but because we want to do things as unto Christ? How many of you, if Jesus was going to come to your house for dinner tomorrow night, you guys would do a little extra cleaning? Like if Jesus is like, hey, the Trinity wants to show up and have dinner at your house, we're going to actually bring the apostles are going to come over. How many of you would spend the next 24 hours mad cleaning your house? The place would be meticulous and spotless. I think the reality is Jesus does come to our work, and we should be honoring him in the excellence of how we do it. There should be above standards, covenants, and fiduciary practices at the bank better be excellent, not because the treasury may come shut it down, but because Jesus is honored by an excellently ran bank. And then the question of where do we get to stand for biblical truths? Where do we get to say, this is what we're going to do, not because the law says it or industry says it, but because this is a biblical truth. We're going to stand for this. And then when it comes to ministry, how do we look at every one of those dimensions of being platforms where we get to demonstrate the gospel and proclaim the gospel? Sean used the number 1.7. That's also the average number of people who come to Christ in the average American church in a year. The average church in America sees 1.7 salvations in a given year. Now, church plants are different, and you may be part of a really vibrant church that's breaking the norm on that, which is awesome. I am too. But across all the hundreds of thousands of churches, it's 1.7 salvations per church per year. The average small, medium business I work with sees anywhere from 4 to 7 salvations per year. 30-something people discipled, and does about 3 times the giving to global missions of a local church. But they're running plumbing companies and HVAC companies and physical therapy groups. Why? Because in 94X, we have 94 times the opportunity, and 70 to 80% of the people coming to them are not going to church anyway. And so you get a chance to do ministry in the middle of the world, which is where Jesus did stuff. So you are a king and a queen. The question is, are you a good one? Just like we are salt or light, are we good at it? You've been invited to a special day that Sean risked a lot to put on. Can we give a round of applause for Sean's courage to risk this? Events are a pain in the arse to put on. If you've ever put on events like this, they are painful. They're like a love-hate relationship with events. And so to go to put on an event and then have an event put on like this with this many people coming is a big deal. But the reality is, there's events that happen all the time. And the only thing that will matter is what changes in your leadership after today that will matter in eternity. When you go and stand before the bema seat of Christ, and he says, what did you do with the time I gave you? There's not an entrance exam to heaven, but there is a performance review in heaven. It is an open book test. He wants you to win. And the question is, will you take something from today, from all the things you'll learn, and actually do something that will lead ripples into eternity? Now, it was actually Thomas Edison who first said that inspiration without execution is hallucination. Like, we are guilty of Christians. A lady at my church likes to say, Christians are like marathon runners who are always carbing up for the race they never eat or they never run. She said, we're spiritually obese. We've got plenty of spiritual carbs. We just don't like to do a lot of spiritual exercise. I hope today you get some leadership carbs, but I hope you then go do some leadership exercise that changes Tulsa and changes Oklahoma and changes our country. I believe that business is actually a fantastic gymnasium for you and I to work out our faith. When I began wrestling with my identity and vocation coming together, here's a couple things I realized. I thought I was actually a pretty darn good Christian. I knew a lot of the Bible. I practiced the disciplines. I gave generously. I served generously. I mean, I thought I was a pretty darn good Christian on Sundays. But I was judging my Christianity by Sundays. It is easy to be a great Christian on Sunday. If you want to know your actual spirituality, it's Thursday at 3 o'clock when you're dealing with lawyers like Kirk who are deposing you. It's when you're dealing with employee issues and technology failures and financial problems. It's when you're being betrayed by partners. It's when you're dealing with hard stuff. That's your actual faith. It's easy to say God is sovereign, God is good, when you're not needing him for anything. But when the world is falling apart, that's when your actual faith is demonstrated. So part of what I began to realize when Jesus said, I'm not getting you out of business, I want you to stay in business and figure out how to follow me there, was I actually was not nearly as strong as I thought I was. And my workplace actually became a place where I began to need Jesus, know Jesus, and grow in him. And so this is not just about God saying, I've called you to go do something for me because I need you. You actually need this. Your spiritual life will be half-baked if it's only lived on the margins of your life. Part of embracing this 94X idea that Sean has put forward is actually an invitation to a radically abundant, joyful life in Jesus, because it's one of actually saying yes to Jesus every hour of every day instead of just a couple hours on the weekends. So I believe that business is a gymnasium for faith. The business I run happens to be what I like to call it a dojo of discipleship. We need groups. You need to be in community. You need to be reading books and talking to other people who are challenging you and helping you navigate the problems and sticky situations you find yourself in to say, let's be about our Father's business in the context of what we're doing. Find yourself sparring partners. Be involved with somebody else who's going to help you do this. But as I mentioned, the issue is not easy steps. This is a complex equation, but it is just sadly truth. This smart guy studying change management and organizations found this general principle. Our resistance to change is really, really high. You've heard the classic thing, like, until the pain of staying is not greater than the pain of moving, we won't do it. The reality is, I can give you first steps. I can give you easy steps of what to do all day long, but if you don't have a wild dissatisfaction with your current Christian life, if you don't have a grave disturbance with the condition of our country and the city and your family and the community, if you don't have a deep, holy discontent, combined with a vision of a picture of a future reality that is actually captivates your vision, where you go, I can't stand the idea of not being part of that, then no amount of first steps will matter. But if you've got a wild, holy discontent, if you're dissatisfied with current reality, if you get a vision that you go, I want to be part of seeing that be true, and I just got a couple quick steps, those have to be at least 2 times R. You actually have to have twice the compounding effect of dissatisfaction, vision, and first steps to overcome resistance to change. If you do, then things begin to happen. But if your what and your why coming out of here is not exponentially greater than the inertia of just busyness, because no one's got extra time on their hands to suddenly just wedge in some ministry stuff. The hurdles of all the, I mean, think about our business, think about our people, think about laws, think about our schedule, think about what's going on. If you don't have a what and a why that is so powerful that it overcomes all of that, then all the how-tos and the way stuff that we're going to offer you today doesn't really matter. So the question to me is, what will the epitaph of your leadership be? There were kings and queens who had entire lives that were summarized in just a sentence. She was born, she was okay, she died. Next person. Lots of stuff happened, but it didn't really matter. The rest of it just got burned up. And then there were people who had incredible stories. Part of what I'm on the campaign to do right now, I said I serve about 4,000 members. I'm trying to rush to serve about 5,300 members by 2025. But the reason that rooms like this and the global ideas that Sean's talking about matter is, look down this bottom numbers here. As people engage in things like 94X, as they engage in things like what I do at C12, as they engage in this broader faith and work arena, you don't have a chance to literally change the world. Now, just like when Mordecai, the foster uncle, came to Esther, this Jewish queen in Persia, modern-day Iran, and said, hey, what if for such a time as this you've been called to this? The thing he said before that is what we miss. He actually said to her, now, if you don't do this, God will raise up someone else. He didn't say, the world's on your shoulders. If you don't respond, like the whole world's going to go to hell in a handbasket, and it's going to be your fault. He actually says, what if you miss your moment? Like, what if God created you to be part of this story, and this is why you're here? You might miss your part of his story. So I'm not here saying that we need to bunker down and survive. I'm saying God's going to be fulfilling his promises, advancing his kingdom, fulfilling his agenda, and you and I are invited to be full-time parts of it. I want to challenge people here. I get really disturbed by the rate of Christians in America who have a bunker mentality, who are operating in business and in life with the goal of, how do I survive? How do I preserve my wealth, my comfort, my conveniences, my rights? How do I make sure I'm not inconvenienced at all? And my goal is just to hold on for glory. God did not leave us here to survive the world. He left us here to be embassies, to plant a flag and say, I'm here to transact with you and actually demonstrate my Father's policies and agendas in a real palpable way. We are here to change the world, be salt and light, not to be nuclear bomb shelters that just survive the messiness of the world. We are here to fight not for victory, but from victory. If you have a bunker mentality, it's probably because you think you're trying to just survive the assault of the enemy and the world and all the caustic stuff out there. Jesus said, I won. Death, where's your sting? It's a mess. Like, the world is a hot mess. It's already not yet. And you and I are here to get to from a place of, I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. You and I get to walk into business and go, I had a friend who ran a restaurant, and kind of like some of the questions Kirk was getting asked, he was super scared about doing anything with Jesus. And he his first thing he felt led to do, he wanted to do a little Bible study kind of secretly. He had 300 employees. He said, I'm going to do a secret little Bible study. And he felt led to put a cross up on a wall. And I don't, that was a big deal to him. So he put a cross up on a wall. I was like, good for you. God bless you. And he got a complaint. A Jewish longtime customer came to get breakfast tacos, said, hey, since when's this bleepity bleep cross stuff on the wall? And so he called me, he's like, Mike, oh my gosh, I got a complaint this morning. I'm going to have to take the cross down. I think I got to cancel the Bible studies. I think this is not going to work. And I said, man, how many customers do you serve in a day? And he said, a day, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000. I said, how many complaints a day do you get for bad refried beans, bad service, the plate wasn't clean, rude waitress? He's like, all day long. I was like, do you shut down do you stop selling tacos because you got one complaint? Do you to get out of the business because you had one waitress drop a plate and shatter glass? That's just part of business. You deal with it. You figure it out. Are you going to really run away because you got one complaint? When 3 years later, he's had 9 of his employees come to Christ, when he has marriages that have been saved at his workplace, when he has people passing up 20% pay raises to go work somewhere else because this is the place where I'm being changed, that one complaint by a guy who bought tacos once a day suddenly seems pretty insignificant for what was to be gained. It's a weird time. I think time's an interesting thing. We could do a whole talk on Chronos and Kairos and such, but I believe that if you are here today, it's because it's your time, that God has called you for a time such as this. He's invited you into his story. I believe it's not just your time, though. Ephesians 2:10 is a plural pronoun statement where he says, God prepared us, he prepared y'all for good things in advance to do. So he's called this community to be about his business. I believe this is ultimately God's time, where he has got plans to, by his power and for his glory, redeem and restore the world. And he'd love you to have front row seats at it, to be part of it, to be a beneficiary of it, to proclaim it, that this is a fantastic time. And my hope is that you become a king or queen who isn't just not bad, but that it would be said of you, like what when disciples went to some Greek Roman towns, there's a spot where they arrived, and the city council went, "This is those crazy people who have been turning the world upside down. They're causing good trouble. This is dangerous people." Michael Ferris said that the work I'm involved in is the most dangerous thing in America. I hope today invites you into a dangerous life, and that it turns Tulsa upside down, turns Oklahoma upside down. But here's the cool thing. Our God will father you and turn your world upside down in the process as well. What I love about Sean is, Sean, when I first met you and I first started talking about this stuff, I saw not just a cool resume of, look what I'm doing, he's a great example of faith at work and living this stuff out. I saw a man experiencing incredible joy in the Lord. Who you were enjoying him and experiencing the blessing of saying yes to him, not just exhausted by all the things I'm doing for him. Let's be kings and queens that change the world. Let's be kings and queens that are salt and light, that say yes to Jesus, that embrace that 94X potential he's been given, and know that one day Jesus is going to say, what did you do with 94X? Because you all had it. And let's not be the wicked servant. You know, the servant who was so afraid of what might happen, he might lose something, he stowed it away. So when the master came back, he's like, hey, I didn't lose it. Here's the one talent you gave me. That's the one of the few times that someone's called wicked. The person who was so concerned about not losing what he was given was called wicked by the master. Everyone else was celebrated for the risks they took. So let's take risks to the glory of God in business. Thank you.